everyone, welcome back to the channel. As everyone should be aware, we just got a Yu-Gi-Oh ban list about 24 hours ago. So we're going to be going over a updated Yu-Gi-Oh meta tier list for the September 2024 format. Now this is strictly pre-Rage of the Abyss, so we're not going to be including any of the Azamina cards. There are a few events pre-Rage of the Abyss, so we're going to focus in those events. Let's get started. We have Tier 1, Tier 1.5, Tier 2, and then Rogue. We have a limited selection of decks here. I don't want to include your Tier 7 Burning Abyss deck that's lost Beatrice because it's not going to be relevant for the meta anyways. I want to strictly focus on decks that have the ability to win a premier event. Let's get started with what is expected to be the best deck of this upcoming format, and that should be no surprise to anyone, YuGiOh Fiendsmith. YuGiOh Fiendsmith right now is in a very unique spot where it's the deck that can take the best advantage of the Fiendsmith package because of TCG exclusives like Area Leader and Necro Princess. So they have a way to put a level 6 Fiend on the board to make Wave Hiking Caesar. They also have a recursive one in Area Leader which can help them access their Fiend engine. Additionally, they have a pseudo Omni-Negate in Phantom of Yubel, so they have protection against something like, say, Nibiru, that every other deck doesn't have. This deck should be the expected best deck, and it is for good reason. It was second to Fiendsmith Snake Eye, and right now it's the only deck that doesn't really have a big discrepancy from the list. Players like Lucas Sacco were able to get top 8 at YC Sacramento, as well as follow it up with regional tops without the need for Apollousa. So this deck can function very well without Apollousa, function very well without Beatrice. Lacrima does hurt, but this deck is hurt the least by it. So it's my pick for the best deck. I'm going to put Branded in Tier 1.5. I still think Branded is very capable. I mean, they've lost, what, 1-2 Branded fusions. That doesn't stop them from being able to go Gimmick Puppet, Albion, and set up the same absurd boards as before. In the hands of a very capable pilot, Branded is still a very playable deck. It's just a little bit less consistent now as if they get the Aluber stopped. However, it doesn't really stop the ceiling of the deck whatsoever. Next, I'm going to go with Ritual Beast. This deck is largely unhit. I mean, Ritual Beast still has full access to pretty much everything. They can still access Protoss, and Protoss Cold Dark against Yubel, Protoss Cold Fire against Tempai and Snake Eyes. Still very powerful. Additionally, they are a Shifter deck, and Shifter didn't get hit. Not much more to say. I'm going to put pure Snake Eyes, and I know this might sound a bit hypocritical, but I love this deck. However, I think it's a Tier 2 deck right now. It's still capable of beating the best decks, but combine the consistency hits with the vulnerability to stuff like Nibiru now. Sure, they can make DD Wave Hiking Caesar. It's not impossible. It's just very hard to do it. To resolve your combo now, it is a 3-card combo, and there are various choke points that you just can't get around anymore. So I do think it's weaker right now. It will get stronger with the Azamina cards, but they're not really a factor till October. I'm going to say I think the Fire King build of this, while it does play a lot more bricks, it is much more resilient to disruption because that's what the Fire King cards do. However, again, the problem is they allow less forms of non-engine, and the Fire King cards, they are bricks themselves. The Cash Tira version of the deck, Fiendsmith Snake Eye Cash Tira, I still think this deck is quite capable, but again, the problem is it doesn't really play through hand traps. It doesn't really prevent hand traps. It more so plays through hand traps with the Cash Tira cards. That being said, something like Nibiru is still a big problem for a deck that doesn't set up any negation. So Tier 1.5, I think this is going to be very good versus Rogue, and it's probably going to be very good against, say, the regional level. But when you get to maybe the YCS level, in fact, you could even say it's Tier 2. Actually, the more I'm saying it, I probably should be having this at Tier 2. Fiendsmith Memento. This is actually a really cool deck. They still have pretty much everything. They've still got that big 5k guy who is really just a pain in the ass to deal with. And if you set it up with a trap, it's still a negate. So that's pretty good there. Pearly is a rogue deck. As much as I know it's a very popular deck and amongst many community members, its engine just doesn't compare with other decks. Now it does have a pretty good Yubel matchup because they don't destroy. There's so it's non-destruction removal. That's a very key factor. However, at the end of the day, it's still Pearly, and like if you go second against the Fiendsmith Yubel deck, now they're all going to transition to Wave Hiking Caesar. It's very hard to deal with that card in Pearly. For the Wonder Race is a very solid tier 2 deck. Again, it plays Shifter, it can play Featherstorm. It's the same as it's always been. It's just a very, very annoying deck to play against. Labyrinth. Labyrinth I still think is a very good tier 1.5 deck. They can still play Transaction Rollback quite effectively. It's probably the only deck that can play Transaction Rollback quite effectively right now. And again, I know they lost Skill Drain, but Labyrinth can do pretty much everything it was doing before. It can still do the same thing. It's not really much to say. It was relatively unhit. It's just everything else got a little weaker, which makes Labyrinth a little bit better. Tempai, you could argue Tempai is probably a tier 2 deck right now. The loss of 2 field spells, it's actually a bigger hit than some people might initially think. The fact that you only have to deal with 1 field spell now, that as soon as it hits the field, you just go SP Little Knight. You go Desiree, negate it. Anything you can do to disrupt that 1 field spell, once that's done, there's nothing the deck can do. Everything is now affected, and that's really been the big selling point of Tempai, that the field spell gives you protection, and once you hit battle phase, you have another monster that gives you protection. Take that away, the deck can be disrupted. When you disrupt this deck, it's pretty much a glass cannon. It's super fragile. Runic Stun, so this is specifically Runic Stun here. I think this deck is very capable. Even in the loss of 2 skill drains, they can just play other floodgates. It's very annoying when this deck gets rolling. It's in a playstyle that stun decks have always been around since the beginning of Yu-Gi-Oh! They're always going to be around. Where they fall in the meta is really debatable, but because of the Runic cards being so resilient and just such a recursive engine, combine that with your floodgates, they're always finding at least 1 to 2. The reason I say it's tier 2 is because certain floodgates they play, like Gozen Match and Rivalry, don't really affect Yubel. Like Yubel can play under the Dark Fiend lock, and if you lock them into Light Fiends, they just make Desiree and then link off the Desiree, and then the Desiree can out the floodgates, or they can out the Runic Fountain. However, combo Runic with Runic Whitewoods, this deck is in a very, very unique spot right now where it doesn't get affected by the Banlist whatsoever, but everything around it became weaker, making this deck naturally stronger. I really do think Whitewoods Runic is a deck that can, if you aren't prepared for it, Joshua Schmidt will make sure you pay. The Gimmick Puppet, I'm going to call it tier 2. Gimmick Puppet is able to FTK still. It's just a little bit harder now because they are very reliant on the field spell. So not really too much to say there. Voiceless Voice, just super rogue deck right now. It's pretty much protect the castle, and with everyone using Bestials right now, it just naturally hurts this deck. Tier Elements, probably a very big hit because they lost Beatrice. Beatrice was like one of their main ways to build consistency for the deck. It's something the Fiendsmith engine did for them. They really relied on Beatrice. Out of all of the decks that got hit, this is the one that really couldn't afford to lose Beatrice, and they lost Beatrice, so naturally this deck is weaker. I know they get Grass back, but 60 card Grass builds of this deck are just not very good. They're very inconsistent with one of each of your tier names. Thunder Dragon, again, it's just not a very good deck. I mean, 2 Colossus as opposed to 1. Did anyone really matter? Did it hurt anyone at all, and did it make an impact in the format with 1 Colossus? It was only being played as another engine with the Nemesis cards to access Colossus in non-Thunder Dragon decks. So the only decks that this is really relevant to are decks that are like pure Thunder Dragon, or Thunder Dragon with another engine in there. That's the only ones that mattered. So again, I don't think Colossus is going to matter in the format at all. Rescue Ace, this is another deck. It's just the position I put Rescue Ace in right now is just the engine of it's a decent engine, but the fact is it can't play enough non-engine, and that's like the biggest issue with Rescue Ace. Like, you can play all the Snake Eye cards, you can play all this Diabell Star, Sinful Spoil stuff, you can even throw Flamebird in there. The problem with the deck is, it has no room for non-engine. So it can't go second then. That's the biggest issue. And I've been battling where I should put Fiendsmith Musket. I still think Fiendsmith Musket is a 1.5 category deck. The Fiendsmith cards, like losing Lacrima doesn't really hurt the Muskets, because I believe they are light Fiends, if I am correct on that. And they play a good board breaker approach, and the cards are very resilient to disruption. They have a lot of in-archetype negation, and Musket Max is essentially a custom card. The problem is it's a Musket card. Okay, the last one I forgot was Drytron. I know someone's going to ask about this because Ava came back. Bad news for you, Drytron is not good. It wasn't good before, it won't be good now, and unless they print some absolutely ridiculous piece of support, it's not going to be good in the future. And that's going to be the meta tier list for today. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'd love to hear everyone's opinions, and as always, don't forget to like and subscribe so I can give you more Yu-Gi-Oh content. I'm Retro YuGiOh, signing off. Bye.